Welcome back to the holidays on Hill TV. We know you're busy getting ready for the holiday this week, but we've still got a bit of news to give you. I'm Jamal Simmons. While Congress is battling it out over impeachment, we wanted to check in on what voters are thinking. Here with us is senior survey analyst at Change Research and friend of Hill TV, Nancy Zdunkewicz. Thanks for being back with us, Nancy.
Good to see you.
All right, so you've got some new research that you guys have put out recently, and it takes a look at three congressional districts that are vulnerable.
Correct, and these are actually Republican-held districts.
And people don't usually do that, right?
Right. So much of the focus has been on the Democrats who are in seats that Donald Trump carried in 2016. But what about some of those competitive districts that are at risk in 2020? So we went to Illinois 13, Michigan 6, and New York 24.
And Michigan 6 is Fred Upton out in Kalamazoo, which is, I'm from there, so I know that district's very on the bubble.
I have to tell you, it's tough for him. Just looking at that district alone, very, very tough. And what I was shocked by was how much this situation is true for both Democrats and Republicans, where being partisan can come back to hurt you. And so only 30% of voters in those districts said that Donald Trump has done nothing wrong, and so is not something that should be impeached, right? There's about 23%, though, who are in this soft zone, who say that either Donald Trump has done something wrong, but perhaps it's not impeachable, or that they haven't seen enough evidence to know that what he's done was wrong, or maybe he's done something impeachable, but they're not sure if impeachment is what they want to do. And so in that atmosphere, when you just try to sweep things under the rug, you also appear partisan. You also appear to be just towing the party line and not independent. And I know this will be a shock to many people, but there are still parts of the country where it pays to appear like you are willing to look at both sides.
All right, so these voters want candidates or their representatives to not just choose sides with their particular party. They want them to take a look at these facts in a cold, a little bit more analytical way. Are these primary voters, or are these like across the board voters that'll vote in the general election?
So this was likely voters in a general election.
Okay.
Right. And so the more that they are driven to have no daylight between themselves and Donald Trump so that they can avoid a primary challenge, the harder it becomes for them to keep that brand of being a little bit independent, of being able to buck the party line. And the sort of consensus view among Republicans about what their message ought to be on impeachment right now is that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. There's nothing to see here. And voters think that is very unserious.
So the partisanship itself is bothering people too.
Correct. So they do believe in these districts. Majorities say that Donald Trump has abused the power of his office. Majorities say that Donald Trump has put his personal political interest before the good of the country. They even agree that he has engaged in crimes. The majority say he's engaged in crimes. The sort of fact pattern that he withheld military aid to a foreign country in order to pressure them to investigate a political rival. Majorities believe that that is true.
So they believe grounds have been established and for the punishment or the impeachment Donald Trump may face. But they also think not holding Trump accountable is a problem. So they're not necessarily inclined to vote for somebody who doesn't want to hold Trump accountable in some way. So
we actually asked them if they approved or disapproved of the way that their member of Congress was handling certain issues. And large majorities said that they thought they were handling the impeachment of Donald Trump poorly. And majorities said that he was, that any of these Congress people were doing a poor job when it comes to holding President Trump accountable, or when it comes to standing up to Donald Trump when it's in the best interest of people in their district. So they're not striking this balance well when it comes to appealing to those independents, the sort of voters that you still need to win in these districts that are so tough, that are so competitive. They're not getting credit for that sort of tightrope that they have to walk right now.
And so you did two things here. One, you took a baseline and looked at where people are today. And then you guys asked a bunch of questions to see whether or not people moved in one direction or another after they got exposed to some information. And what did you find when you sort of exposed them to a couple different arguments?
Right, and we made sure it was a fair test. We put the best arguments on both sides. So we had Republican arguments, we had Democratic arguments. And then we asked people, are they more or less likely to support a member of Congress who opposes impeachment? And 54% said that they would be less likely to support a member of Congress who opposes impeachment. And I was kind of shocked by that.
Well, what's interesting is, so you say in your research here that, particularly, let's talk about Michigan again, people don't like either party. But somebody like Fred Upton, who's been around for like a generation, right? Some of these other people have been around 2, 3, 4 election cycles. So they don't like party, but they tend to vote for a Republican. Why isn't a Democrat actually being able to be more competitive in some of these districts? Or is this a more recent phenomenon?
No, I do think that these are more competitive districts. I mean, we saw that in 2018, and I think that we're going to continue to see that trend, especially as women, college-educated women, are pulling away. We are even seeing shifts with white working-class women. Since 2016 to 2018, there was a big shift, and hopefully this trend will still continue in 2020.
So what's your advice then to members of Congress? You've done all this research, you've seen what moves here. What's your advice to candidates who are running in these districts to try to maybe get rid of some of these marginal Republicans?
Talk about health care. Talk about health care costs. It is still the #1 issue. And what was most surprising
Medicare for all?
I think talking about healthcare costs is probably the best thing you can do, and I don't think that you necessarily need to go out there and talk about, Medicare for all or single payer or whatnot. Just talk about the cost of prescription drugs and that you are willing to do something about them. And what was most remarkable to me in this survey was that maybe impeachment isn't everybody's #1 issue. It's just very divisive. You're not going to be rewarded for it, but it is your health care policy that is going to be the biggest thing because it is the #1 issue for voters. And the approval ratings for these members of Congress on health care costs is horrible. So talk about their '1 issue.
So you wouldn't advise them to do what's happening in New York, where one member of Congress has said he's going to switch parties to become a Republican, or in Michigan, you've actually got Alyssa Slotkin who's saying she's going in front of her constituents and saying, you may unelect me for this, but I'm going to vote for impeachment anyway, and she's holding events in Michigan around that messaging. So would you advise them to go take on this impeachment fight directly, or to just fold up the tent and head for the exits, like some Democrat, at least one Democrat seems to be doing?
Listen, I think that if you're a Democrat in Congress, you need to give a real answer to why you've decided to support impeachment, especially many of these members have decided that they weren't going to support impeachment until the most recent revelations in late September. And then they moved like the country moved. And I think you need to tell people in a serious way why it is that you've decided to vote this way. But then you need to shift on to the issues that matter most to people, because when they go to their districts, they're not hearing about impeachment. They're hearing about the cost of living. They're hearing about healthcare costs. They're hearing about the issues that touch their lives every single day. So I'm not really in the business of giving advice to Republicans, but I will say that if you are running against these Republicans, you should talk about issues like healthcare costs. And if you are in one of these at-risk Democratic districts that maybe Donald Trump won, that you really need to continue to use all of your communications, not to talk about impeachment, but to talk about those issues. And that's why you hear Nancy Pelosi saying that we're investigating and legislating. And that's why you're seeing all of this movement on other issues, like healthcare costs, like trade, et cetera, so that it is clear to voters that this idea that nothing's getting done because of the hyper-partisan impeachment-obsessed Democrats, that narrative just isn't true.
Thanks for watching Hill TV on YouTube. Be sure to click subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we post new videos. And head to thehill.com for all the latest political news.